PodCastle, episode 876 for Tuesday the 28th of January 2025. Nine-Fingered Maria by Hilary Moon Murphy, read by Christopher Raynaga and produced by Eric Valdes. Rated PG. Good morning, good day, good afternoon and good evening, and welcome to PodCastle, the flying castle of fantasy fiction. I'm your host, Matt Dovey, and it is my pleasure to have clambered through the dusty corridors of the Underlibrary, fighting off giant spiders and pallid flesh worms and that one weird guy called Derek who no one can remember inviting in, all to retrieve a story deep from the archives and once again present for your enjoyment Nine-Fingered Maria by Hilary Moon Murphy, narrated by Christopher Raynaga. This tale from the vaults first ran as PodCastle 58 back in 2009, having first been published in 2003 in New Voices in Science Fiction, edited by the late Mike Resnick. Before we get into that, an announcement that excites me hugely. We are hosting a special submissions call for Disability Pride and Magic to celebrate disabled authors, characters and themes. And that's a broad definition of disabled, including physical disabilities, neurodivergent, mental illness, sensory disabilities, chronic illness, and invisible and undiagnosed disabilities. From the announcement that went up on our website earlier this month, in fiction, disabled people, where we appear at all, tend to be left on the sidelines or treated as passive sources of inspiration, or worse, ridicule or disgust. In fantasy, we get our difficulties erased with superpowers or magical cures. We are looking for stories that defy these trends. We want to see stories that show the dynamic nature of disability, that grapple with ableism, internal and external, and that, ultimately, see us as fully human, a depressingly low bar that has still failed all too often. This submissions call is open now, right now, all the way through to the end of March. It's been guest edited by Devon Martin, whose name you usually hear up front as one of our two audio producers, but they've been slushing here and steadfastly working to the Dragon's glory for, God, as long as I have, I think, years and years. They are a very excellent human, principled and clear-eyed, and there is genuinely no one I'd trust more to run this month of stories. And if you've listened to me through the past year or so of Hostpots, you'll know that disability pride is hugely important to me. Since my late diagnosis of autism and ADHD 2 years ago, at the grand old age of 38, I've slowly come to realise that I'm disabled in many ways I never acknowledged and didn't understand before. And in the 4 years of decline since my wife was diagnosed with MS, I've seen so much of society's ableism firsthand for the first time, from systemic issues like accessible paths to personal issues like people treating you as invisible rather than having to acknowledge their own discomfort at seeing a disabled person. I've spoken before about how much internalised ableism I still carry. Go back and listen to my outro on episode 857 after Samir Serk-Morato's ectasis. And that's because I inherited it from the stories the world told me growing up. The ones where disfigurement was always a marker of villainy, where disability was a manifestation of poor morality, or a punishment for it. I've talked about the power of stories so many times, and I sincerely believe in it. As do you, I warrant, because none of us would be here right now doing what we're doing if we didn't. This is a chance to use that power to right wrongs, to show people a little truth in a way that sticks, to make an audience understand the injustices and struggles and lies they've been told, so that they empathise a little better with the real, disabled humans they'll meet out in the world. For all the magic we have in our stories, there's nothing more magical than that, I reckon. If you want to submit, the full announcement with all the details is on our website at podcastle.org. But in brief, stories between 2,000 and 6,000 words, originals or reprints, open till March 31st. I can't wait to read what you send us. Your author today, Hilary Moon Murphy, writes and sells fantasy stories in Minneapolis and works as a freelance writer and designer on the Pathfinder and Starfinder TTRPGs. She also runs MinSpec, the Minneapolis Speculative Fiction Writers Group. Chris Raynaga is a multiple award-winning writer with stories appearing in Cemetery Dance, The Drabblecast and The Book of Cthulhu 2. You can enter his magical reality at www.christopherraynaga.com. And now pay attention, for our tale is about to begin. You better watch carefully out that window to see it.
Nine-Fingered Maria by Hilary Moon Murphy. Spying on the neighbors when they moved in was a time-honored tradition in my house. My mom and grandpa would peer out from behind the lace curtains of our window and note every item coming out of the moving van. "Look at those lamps," Mom would say, her medical alert bracelet glinting as she scribbled the information in her observation log. "What kind of person has lamps shaped like chorus girls?" Grandpa, who did not speak much, just licked his lips and refocused his binoculars. Me, I preferred to do my spying up close. A short boy like me could get away with a lot. Most people assume that I was just a dopey little kid when I was really almost 12. I'd stand outside, bouncing my tennis ball in a totally absorbed way, and then send my ball flying in the direction of the neighbor's house and pretend to lose it. This was harder than it sounds. In San Francisco, almost no one has front yards. Only a few scraggly bushes or flowers and containers break up the relentless landscape of concrete. So, I'd bounce my ball through the open garage door as the neighbors moved stuff in. If they tried to shoo me away, I'd cry because I couldn't find the ball. Or better yet, I'd fall and skin my knee so that they had to take me inside and clean me up and give me a bandage. The whole time, I would look around, listening to every conversation. The day the Vargas family moved in, I could tell right away that they were worthwhile targets for up-close surveillance. They had some of the weirdest stuff I've ever seen coming out of a moving van. Banks of old electronic equipment with tons of wires sticking out, big plastic anatomical dummies, giant specimen jars filled with deformed animals, frogs with eyes on their legs, or fish with another mouth on their bellies. I put my binoculars back in my jacket and bounced my ball down the hill toward their house. It flew into their garage. I chased after it, when this girl appeared from behind the door and caught my ball. She was probably my age, several inches taller than I was, with long, straight black hair, pulled back in a ponytail, plain white t-shirt, denim jacket, and jeans with a hole worn in the knee. She stared at me with intense, dark eyes and said, "What are you doing here?" "I was just getting my ball," I said, stepping out of the way of two movers carrying a large red bureau with multicolored wax stains all over it. "No, you weren't." She cocked her head to the side and raised her eyebrow. "You were spying." "I wasn't." "That's okay. I like spies." She gave me back my ball and showed me her hands. "I have 9 fingers. I am a witch." I counted her fingers, 5 on the left hand, 4 on the right. Wow, I thought, she really must be a witch. Then I realized what I was thinking and shook my head. Parlor tricks. I was falling for parlor tricks. "How come you only have 9 fingers?" "I used to have 11, she said, pointing to a small silvery scar on her right hand. "2 of them were too small, so my dad cut them off. He keeps them in a jar in his study." I stared at her open-mouthed, unable to come up with a reply. Maybe, I thought, I should just skip the whole spying thing this time. Thanks for helping me find my ball," I said. "I have to go now." "I'll go with you," she said, following me across the street and back up the hill. "I've always wanted to see a spy's house." "You don't want to come." I tried to think of a way to keep her out of my house. "My mom's not well." She shrugged. Witches have good immune systems. As we neared my house, the lace curtains in our living room window fluttered. Mom must have seen us coming. In the time it took for us to finish climbing the steps, she and Grandpa had hidden the binoculars in the observation log and hastily dealt out a game of cards on the living room table. Mom did not look good. She tried to hide the thinness of her frame by wearing baggy sweats, but I could see the gauntness in her wrists and face. "Kevin," she said, forcing a smile, "you brought a friend to meet us. Are you going to introduce us?" I'd never brought anyone to my house before. I looked at the 9-fingered girl and realized I hadn't asked her name. The girl strolled through my living room, looking around. She touched the Afghan-covered sofa and chairs and asked, "Why does all your furniture face the window?" I felt my cheeks flush hot with embarrassment. "We like the sun." The girl nodded. "Which is why the curtains are drawn." Fine, I thought. Get the introduction over with, and then get her the hell out of my house. "This is my mom and grandpa," I said. "And my name is Kevin." "Maria," the girl finally said. "I'm Maria Vargas." "Maria," my mom said, still trying to smile. "You'll be going to Washington school?" "Yes, 5th grade." "So will Kevin. Maybe you'll be classmates." "Why did you hide the binoculars?" Maria asked. My mom glared at me, and her smile faltered as she turned back to Maria. "What binoculars?" "The ones under your chair," Maria said. "Mind if I use your bathroom?" Before we could answer, Maria strode out of our living room and through the kitchen. I tried to catch her and tell her to use the bathroom upstairs, but it was too late. She was already staring at the neighborhood observation schedule that Mom had posted on the kitchen wall. Maria turned to me, a bemused smile playing on her face. "Does the Cheng family really walk their dog at 6:36 every morning?" "You don't have to use the bathroom," I said, feeling the heat rush again to my face. "You were just..." "Spying?" "Yeah." I stood there a moment, wondering if I looked as stupid as I felt. I decided that I probably did. "A spy who feels his privacy being violated. I think I like you," Maria said. "Will you show me the rest of your house?" I stared at her a moment. She leaned against the kitchen wall and met my gaze with her dark eyes. I sensed a moment of truce. "Yeah," I said. "I'll give you the grand tour, but only if you show me yours later. I've never seen a witch's house." "Deal," she said, a smile lighting up her face. She held out her hand, and we shook on it. I showed Maria the upstairs rooms. All were clean, spare, and dust-free. In the main bedroom, Grandma sat up in bed, crocheting her afghans. She smiled gently at Maria, but did not talk. "Hi," Maria said. "Stroke," I said. "She can't talk. She can't even understand." Maria sat down on the edge of the bed and offered her hand to my grandma. Grandma's smile deepened, and she laid down her crocheting and grasped Maria's hand in her gnarled fingers. "She understands," Maria said. "You just have to talk to her right." Maria placed my hand on top of Grandma's, and Grandma's smile turned radiant. When we left Grandma, Maria looked back sadly. "She should have a pet, something to love and care for, who will keep her company without needing to talk." "We can't," I said. "My mom is allergic to the world." As I showed her the rest of the house, I wondered if Maria acted this strange all the time. Visions of the rest of the school year flashed in front of my eyes. In 5th grade, it didn't matter how different a kid really was inside as long as he acted like everyone else. I'd always been careful to stand apart so that no one got near the real me. If I started hanging out with someone weird, though, kids would whisper as I went down the hall, "That's Kevin. He hangs out with that weird girl." Did I really want that? I showed her my room in the attic last. It was small, but it had a window that exited onto the roof, where I had my telescope mounted. We crawled out. Maria shivered, her long black ponytail whipping in the chill San Francisco wind. "Wow," she said, looking out at the row of rooftops. "You can see the whole neighborhood from here." "Yeah, sometimes I sit up here late at night wrapped in a couple of Afghans and look into all the lit windows. I like to imagine that I'm there, and I'm part of those families, you know?" "I know," Maria said, a sudden wistful note entering her voice. "Sometimes I imagine that I'm someone else, too." We sat in silence for a while, our legs dangling off the edge of the roof. The wind picked up again, but I didn't want to break the moment. When Maria wrapped her arms around herself to stay warm, I realized I was being selfish. I asked her, "Do you watch The Simpsons?" "Not often. My parents aren't much into television." "My set doesn't get color, and it's the only one in the house, but if you'd like to watch with me." Maria smiled again. "I'd love to." We crawled back inside, and I gave her a red and white afghan to wrap herself in. After I turned on the show, Maria stared at the small black and white screen and said, "Maybe all it needs is adjusting." Adjusting? But she was already on her knees, fiddling with the knobs and the antenna. At her touch, the images on the screen flared to vivid color. I looked at her open-mouthed. "How did you do that?" She flexed her fingers. "It's what I do, just like spying is what you do." Privately, I thought what Maria did was much cooler. I decided that I didn't care if the other kids at school thought I was weird. If Maria would let me, I'd hang out with her. At the end of the show, we walked slowly back downstairs past the kitchen where I could hear the whirring sound of Mom mixing up some of her non-allergenic formula with distilled water in the blender. No wheat, no soy, no corn, no taste. "Should I say goodbye to your mom?" Maria asked. I peered inside of the kitchen. Mom had donned her surgical mask, the one she usually only wore when she went outside. Behind Mom was an open cabinet filled with box after box of that powdered crap, which was almost all she ate now. I pulled back. "You'd better not," I said. I didn't know what set off Mom wearing the surgical mask, but I did know that it meant she would be in a foul mood. After Maria left, Mom leaned against the wall, wheezing slightly. I don't want that girl in here again." "Why?" "She was covered," Mom said. "Covered in cat hair. You know how dangerous that is for me." "But, look, we'll have to vacuum everything tonight. If you want to see her, go to her house. I won't have to deal with her then." Mom crossed her arms, and that was that. My first impression of Maria's house was of sunlight and clutter. Forbidden allergens filled the rooms. 4 friendly and shedding cats. Hundreds of plants, from little spidery ferns that hang in the windows to flowering shrubs in pots. Dusty books, and real food. When I met Maria's mom, her muscled arms covered in flour, she offered me a hot churro, dusted in cinnamon sugar. The candy-shaped pastry flaked as I bit into it. I closed my eyes and ate it slowly, savoring each mouthful. Miss Vargas laughed. "This is a boy who appreciates food. You'll be staying for dinner?" The kitchen smelled of garlic, onions, and beans that had simmered all day. I nodded a fervent yes. Maria gave me a tour of all the rooms. Her bedroom, which featured the red bureau, covered with scented candles. The reading room with overstuffed bookcases. The electronics workshop filled with half-completed projects. The plastic anatomical dummy stood in the hallway outside of her father's study, the one room that we did not enter. As we passed, I stared at the slightly open door, knowing that I would have to return. Spies are like that. When Maria helped her mother make the tamales, I wandered back upstairs. Through the slightly open study door, I saw Dr. Vargas, a heavy-set man with a buzz cut and a polo shirt. He stared intently at a jar full of one-winged sparrows. When I knocked, he looked up and raised an eyebrow. "Ah, you must be Kevin. Come in." I stepped inside. Framed medical degrees and unframed anatomy posters hung on the walls. A cat slept in one of the overstuffed chairs. Specimen jars cluttered every shelf. I scanned the shelves, wondering if I could spot the one thing that had brought me to this room. He smiled at me. "Have you come to see Maria's finger jar?" I sucked in my breath. "How did you know?" "It's what I would want to see if I'd come for the first time." He got up and showed me a small mason jar that sent faint, oily rainbows sliding across the room when he held it to the light. Suspended in the jar were 2 fingers, tinier than even a newborn should have been. He let me hold the jar. It was heavier than I thought, and gave off a strange heat. I closed my eyes and pressed my cheek against the glass. Strange voices whispered in my ear, but I couldn't make out what they said. Reluctantly, I handed the jar back. "Maria's magic. It comes from that jar, doesn't it?" He sat very still holding the jar and did not answer for a long time. "There is a magic to childhood," he said, "that allows the young to change the world in 1,000 small ways. We're all born with the ability, and then slowly lose it. In Maria's case, part of it was preserved. Is that why you cut off her fingers? No. I amputated her fingers because they were too tiny and fused together to ever be useful to her. The magic was a lucky accident. He replaced the jar, showed me the other specimens in his collection of oddities, like the monkey's skull with a socket for a third eye in the middle of its forehead. Then Miss Vargas shouted for us, and we went downstairs to eat the best tamales I ever had. When I went home that night, Mom made me change clothes in the foyer. I had to seal the outfit that I wore to Maria's in a plastic bag before I toted it downstairs to the laundry room. I found I didn't care. It had been worth it. I soon spent most of my afternoons at Maria's. Sometimes I brought my binoculars, and we took turns making notes on the people in the neighborhood. On my 12th birthday, I brought over a parcel sent by my dad, still on the brown wrapping paper. Maria raised an eyebrow when she saw it. Shouldn't you open that at home with your family? No, I said. My mom doesn't like to be reminded of my dad. I can never show her his presence. She touched my arm. I'm sorry. I'm used to it. I tore open my gift. It was a walkie-talkie set, complete with batteries. Damn it, I said, shoving the box on the table. What's wrong? It's the same gift he gave me last year. Didn't he remember? So he gave you the same gift twice, Maria said. That doesn't mean he doesn't love you. My dad gets real absent-minded too. Come on, let's try them out. I bet they're cool. Okay. But when we tried them out, the damn things wouldn't even work. I got so angry that I took one of the walkie-talkies and slammed it into the floor again and again until Maria grabbed my arm. Kevin, she said, you've cracked it open. Is that enough, or do you want a hammer? I looked down at the walkie-talkie with its splintered casing, and I started to cry. It was all busted, like everything else having to do with my family. Maria held me until my sobs receded. With her arm still around me, she picked up the other walkie-talkie. You know, maybe we can use this for something else. I wiped my face dry on my sleeve and blinked at her. What good is one walkie-talkie? Maybe the problem with this set is that the two walkie-talkies weren't attuned to each other. If so, it doesn't matter if you busted one. Maybe we can get this one to pick up other signals. She played with its knobs, and then a crackling sound, and a brisk voice issued over the walkie-talkie's speakers. Check out at 10:15 at 36 and Balboa. I repeat, we need a squad car at 36 and Balboa. I forced myself to shut the jaw I had hanging open. Police channels? She nodded. I hugged her, and we took turns eavesdropping on law enforcement for the rest of the afternoon. It was the best birthday present I'd ever had. Late that night, I wrapped myself in one of my grandma's Afghans and climbed up onto the roof. I trained my telescope on the lit windows of the neighborhood. The last one I did was Maria's. Somehow, she always knew when I was watching. She looked up from the book she was reading and smiled. I smiled back, though I knew she couldn't see me. One day, as Maria and I walked back from school, I saw an ambulance parked outside my house. No, I whispered. Kev, what is it? I didn't answer her. Had my grandma had another stroke? Had something happened to my grandfather? I froze, uncertain of what to do. Then I saw two paramedics carry my mom out on a stretcher, then ran frantically up the hill, leaving Maria far behind. Mom's face and neck were swollen and red, and she was gasping despite the tube they'd forced down her throat to help her breathe. What happened? I screamed. What are you doing with my mom? But the answer came to me after those first panic questions spilled out. Anaphylactic shock. An allergy attack severe enough to kill. I stood there, rooted to the spot, uncertain of what to do. One of the paramedics had started to give her oxygen. The other looked up and said, Your mom's very, very sick. Tell the old man that if he hasn't found the epinephrine yet, we're going to have to transport without it. Epinephrine. I had to find the epinephrine. The mission jerked me into action. I ran to the house, up the stairs, and past Grandpa, who was tearing the bathroom cabinet apart. In Mom's bedroom, there was a chair where she dumped out the contents of her purse when changing bags. There was the EpiPen, along with the keys and a lipstick I'd not seen her use in years. I ran back and tried to give the EpiPen to the paramedic. "A family member has to do it," he said nervously. "Paramedics aren't authorized to administer epinephrine in this state. Do you think the old man—" "Mom taught me to use the EpiPen when I was 6, I said flatly. "I'll do it." But I was shaking when I gave her the shot. I thought, what if this is it? What if this is the last time I get to see my mom? My heart pounding, I climbed in behind my mom as they loaded her in. "I'm going with her," I told the paramedics, daring them to tell me no. The paramedics just looked at Grandpa, who had stumbled out of the house. He nodded and then turned back to stay with Grandma. As our ambulance raced through San Francisco's twisted streets, I held my mom's inflamed, sweaty hand tightly. Her breathing was still ragged, and her blue eyes were wide with panic. I wanted to tell her that I loved her. I wanted to tell her that I was scared. Instead, I told her about all the spying Maria and I had done at school. About how Clayton, the biggest bully in our school, had tried to replace a baby bird in its nest when he thought no one was looking. About how we discovered that Mr. Morris, the biology teacher, wrote love poems to Mr. Randall, the music teacher, in the margins of his class notes. About how the school secretary read the smutty parts from romance novels aloud to the office plants to make them grow better. Despite the tube in her throat, the corners of Mom's mouth turned upward slightly, and she squeezed my hand back. And I began to wonder, what had caused her allergic reaction? Was it something that I had tracked in? The hospital wasn't so bad. The stiff decor was kind of like our house, only without the Afghans. They gave Mom more epinephrine and her symptoms finally went back to normal. After we talked to the medical staff, we still knew nothing. Maybe a little bit of peanut got into her formula. Maybe she developed a new allergy to the formula itself. There was no way of knowing. One of the doctors suggested switching brands. When we left the hospital, Mom was swearing under her breath. "Switch brands? The asshole. How many brands does he think I have left? What the hell am I supposed to eat anymore? The next mistake could kill me." The next mistake. I brooded over this statement all the way home. "Maybe we can make our own formula," I said, as we came in the door. "Maybe," she said, but she was shaking her head. "I'm sick of all of this, Kevin. I'm sick of my allergies, sick of living my life this way. Why am I trapped like this?" She walked off to her room and closed the door behind her so that I wouldn't hear her cry. But I still did. It was very late, but I could not sleep. I left her house to walk across the street to the one place I could go. The main floor of Maria's house was dark, but there were still lights on in the bedroom windows when I rang the bell. Mrs. Vargas answered the door. "Kevin, is everything all right? Maria told us about the ambulance." "Do you think your husband knows anything about allergies?" I blurted. She shook her head. "He's a surgeon, sweetie, but maybe he knows someone." I could tell from her voice that she did not believe her husband could help me. I didn't either. It was not medicine that I sought now, but a miracle. Maria appeared at the door, studying me with her dark eyes. "Want to talk?" I nodded and followed her up the stairs. She opened the door to her room and then thought better of it. Books, papers, and dirty laundry covered the bed and the floor. "Let's go to the study," she said. We sat in the overstuffed chairs of her father's study. "My mom," I said. "My mom almost died today. She ate her formula. She was so careful, and it still went wrong. I don't know what we'll do now." I grabbed Maria's hand. "You must help us." She shook her head. "I can't." "I'm not asking much," I said. "Make it so my mom can eat something. Or if you can't do that, maybe you can help my grandma so my mom doesn't have to take care of her while she's dealing with this." "I can't do any of that," she said softly. "I thought you were my friend." "I am." She got up and started pacing the room. "You could fix televisions. You can make walkie-talkies pick up channels that they were never built to receive. Why can't you help my mom and grandma?" "It's big magic," she said, pulling her hands away from me. "What you're talking about might be more magic than I could do in my entire life. Everything I do is small, because that's all I can do." "What good is it then?" I picked up the warm jar in which floated the 2 tiny fingers and I shook it. "What the hell good is it?" "Kevin," she said, "put down the jar, please." "Parlor tricks! That's all your magic is worth." I whirled to yell at her and hurled the jar to the ground. "No!" Maria screamed. The glass smashed and the liquid sprayed up in 1,000 rainbows. "How could you?" And I didn't know the answer. I dropped to my knees and cut my hands trying to gather the pieces, but it was too late. The tiny fingers lay broken under the shards of glass. Whispering voices rose from all corners of the room. "Say your wish," Maria hissed, grabbing my shirt by the scruff of the neck. "But say it! I paid enough for it." "I'm sorry," I whispered, my hands bleeding. "I just wanted to heal my mom and grandma." The oily rainbow swirled around me, filling the room so hot and thick that I could barely breathe. The whispering voices rose to a shout, and then they were gone. Maria dropped to the floor next to me, sobbing and hitting me over and over. I let her. My grandma has started speaking haltingly, and now understands everything I say to her. I read to her every day. My mom is still allergic to wheat and peanuts, but has discovered that she can eat most other things in small amounts. She's been talking about trying to find part-time work. I watch Maria every day from my telescope, but she never looks up at me.
And welcome back. That was Nine-Fingered Maria by Hilary Moon Murphy. And if you enjoyed that, then there are 2 other stories by her in our archives, even earlier than this one. Episode 14, The Grand Cheat, and Episode 3, Run of the Fiery Horse. I've given a version of this speech before, in a different context a long time ago, but I still stand by it. So, the idea that magic is the preserver of childhood is a long-standing idea. Peter Pan is the obvious example, and that's 120 years old now, though there's almost certainly something before it. But it works along another axis too, which is this. The most important thing we teach our children is that magic exists. And I know it's the most important thing because it's the thing we spend the most time and effort and money teaching them, because damn near every kid's book and every kid's show and every kid's movie is about magic. Disney built an empire on it. Saturday morning cartoons have always been full of it, even now when you stream them any damn day of the week. Because if I want to stick Hilda on in the background while I work through a week, you can't stop me. We use stories to teach kids how the world works, to pass down social norms and expectations and warnings and lessons on being a good person and lessons on not wandering off into dark woods on your own where a wolf might get you. Which is to say, we use stories to get the really important stuff across to them, the stuff we need to stick. And so, what do we put in nearly all of them? Magic. Which is not to say the actual important lesson here is that magic is real and gosh darn it, you just gotta believe. No, I think it's a subconscious drive to teach our kids to not just accept what they see before them, but to dream of bigger and dream of more and not get trapped in banality the way that we inevitably have as adults, but this time to break the cycle. I know there's more out there than mortgages and annual performance reviews and remembering to put the bins out. The good news, then, is that if you're listening to me ramble on about this right now, at the end of PodCastle, the weekly fantasy fiction podcast, well, you won. You did it. You broke the cycle and kept your magic and never forgot how to dream. Sure, there's still weeks where the world manages to get you down and tries to crush it out of you. I won't. He manages it with me still. But you got to protect it and fight for it. Which isn't just a pitch for, hey, come back next week. Please subscribe. Though, if you do want to, patreon.com/EAPodcasts. But a pitch for you to remember that hope and whimsy are not childish things to be left behind in shame. Childish things to be fought for tooth and nail, defended to the last, because they make you something bigger. They make you the realization of generations of toil. That one day, our children will be free enough to dream forever. So go dream, and dream big, and be happy. That was our show for this week. On behalf of everyone at PodCastle, your co-editors Shingai Enjoro Kagunda and Eleanor R. Wood, assistant editor Caitlin Zavanovich, audio engineers Devin Martin and Eric Valdes, and our many wonderful first readers, Andrew Cahoe, Craig Jackson, Amalia Harrington, Julia Patt, Kieran Corsaini, Ryan Cole, Sarah S. Messenger, Shrikripa Krishna Prasad, Tava Nova, Tierney Bailey, Zeev Witties, and myself, Matt Dovey. Thank you for letting us share another story with you. The legal bit. PodCastle is part of the Escape Artist Foundation, a 501c3 non-profit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 international license. That means you can share it, and please do, but you cannot sell it and you cannot change it. If you want specifics, check creativecommons.org. Our music is by Shiva in Exile. Everything we do on PodCastle is 100% donor funded, and if you'd like to support what we and the rest of EA do, please join us on our Patreon at patreon.com/EAPodcasts. Prefer another method? There's details for supporting us via Twitch, Amazon Prime, Ko-fi and PayPal on escapeartist.net. We'll be back next Tuesday with another fantastic tale. In the meantime, you might care to check out our sister podcasts, Escape Pod for science fiction, Pseudopod for horror, Cast of Wonders for YA speculative fiction, and Cat's Cast for speculative cat stories. If your heart belongs to us though, we'll see you next week. Be safe and be kind.